Hello there, it's Tom here, and this is chapter 32 of Gunnerkrigg Court, From the Forest She Came. Now this is probably one of my favourite chapters because it comes after the usual summer break that I write into the timeline of the comic, and it marked a few changes that I made while working on the comic. The first thing you might notice is that the title graphic is slightly different now. I thought it was time to update what was essentially the logo, making it a bit more pleasing to the eye. And since it is the start of a new school year, we start off in a new dormitory for the kids, and we're back here with Renard, who has been left alone by Annie after the events of the previous chapter. So they've not seen each other for about 6 weeks now. And just another small point of interest, this was the first chapter where I decided to start drawing the speech bubbles by hand, rather than using the elliptical marquee tool in Photoshop, just because I felt it would give it a bit more natural look, and let me play around a bit more with the space that I'd be able to give myself with the speech bubbles. But anyway, aside from that, we have Annie returning from the forest. And even though Annie only wears this outfit once so far, this has become kind of a signature look for her, I guess because it was kind of unique compared to anything else that Annie had been wearing at this point, and it was just supposed to show how she's changed after her summer in the forest. Because the outfits that the characters usually wear in the comic are basically just everyday outfits that real-life people might wear, readers of the story seem to really like the outfit that Annie was wearing here. And after the school uniform, this seems to be the second most popular outfit of Annie's that people like to cosplay as, and I've seen some really amazing cosplay from readers. And I guess it was just kind of an iconic look for Annie. But now she's back and meets up with Renard again, and they're both feeling very sorry with how things were left when they last saw each other before the summer. But they both had some time to think, then come to terms with what went on. But aside from that boring plot stuff, this dorm is directly based on the deep core deep sea drilling module from one of my favourite movies, The Abyss. And this moon pool here is basically directly referenced from screenshots that I tried to take from the DVD, just because I really liked the feel that that sort of environment gave, and I thought it'd be interesting to show the kids living in a place like this. And it let me play around a bit with a few water effects. But then Kat makes her entrance, and she and Annie have not seen each other since before the summer holiday. From Kat's perspective, the last time she'd seen Annie was when they were talking with her mom about Surma at the beginning of the previous chapter. And when she last saw Annie, she was in fine spirits, so Annie suddenly running off into the forest must have come out of the blue. And they talk a little bit about that. And here I wanted to show that Kat wasn't exactly mad or upset with Annie right now, and she might even fully understand why Annie did run off into the forest, considering the news that she was given. But on the other hand, Kat was given 6 weeks to basically think about it, without any word from her best friend, and not really given any reassurance as to how she was feeling. And so she's come back not really knowing what to think. She even mentions that she's a little bit angry that Annie would just ditch her and run off into the forest without talking to her first. So she's a little standoffish, and she mentions to Annie that sometimes Annie does stuff that makes it difficult to be her friend. But from this point on, we have Annie doing various things to try and win Kat's friendship back. And it was an opportunity for me to bring back a few of the characters that we may not have seen for a while, like Robot and Shadow and even Basil, as we'll see in a few pages. And it was also a chance to show Annie running around being dumb. I wanted to kind of hint at the fact that she was used to living in the forest over the past 6 weeks. And we can see here that she jumps straight up onto a wall partition and runs around with her bare feet, kind of implying that climbing around things in that way is sort of more normal in the forest. And we can see more of that stuff in the Annie in the Forest side comic that I did. But here I sort of wanted to leave all that stuff up to the reader's imagination. And in this scene here with Shadow, this vending machine was in the maths building of my old school. Completely irrelevant to anything whatsoever, but I thought I'd mention that. Also, this is probably the only opportunity I'd have to draw a evil dino demon in my comic. And thanks to Mort, I was able to draw one. We have a brief scene with Basil and the fairy Red, but we can also see that Kat isn't even really upset with Annie at this point, and she comes to realise that she's probably being a little bit too unreasonable, considering Annie is just trying to apologise. And then we come to one of my favourite panels in the comic, this drawing of this creature here. I've said before in previous videos that this is the kind of thing that I love drawing, where I get to spend a bit of time just putting a ton of detail into an image like this. In this case, some weird kind of sea crab monster. And for this creature, I had a lot of fun researching creatures that currently or used to exist, things like Meristomata and Eurypterids, and using details that several real-life creatures have, but then using them to create some weird abomination unique to the comic. And I think that sort of thing usually works quite well. But really, crustaceans and deep-sea creatures are terrifying enough if you were to look at them, so just making them large usually does the trick. But in this case, neither Annie and Kat know what this creature is, and they head back down to the moon pool, where it's actually Renard that introduces them, and it turns out that this creature is called Lindsay, and she is essentially the dorm mother for this year. She designed the underwater dorms that they'll be staying in, and as we find out later, she also has a husband called Bud, and the two main characters from The Abyss, which is what this underwater vessel is based on, are called Lindsay and Bud Brigman, so I included that as a reference to that too. But since this is the end of the chapter, we come to the point where Annie and Kat make up again, and Annie certainly realizes that she was a little bit selfish, as hinted by Jones in the previous chapter and in the Annie in the Forest side comic. But ultimately Kat is just happy to have her back again, and they exchange crummy gifts, as is the usual tradition. And this bonus page just explains a bit more about the underwater dorms and Lindsay herself. She mentions her husband Bud here, and she mentions that she is a creature known as a meristomatozoon, which is the name that I chose based on the creatures that I was researching when I was drawing her. And this is just the kind of cheesy flyer that you might get at the beginning of a school year. It's a format that I quite like doing in the bonus pages, showing some literature or pamphlets that the kids might get at the court. And that's that. Come back again for chapter 33, Give and Take.